Bill Gaither, a cherished figure in gospel music and a widely respected influence in Christian circles, found himself at the center of a stunning and unforgettable moment today. The courtroom, typically filled with a steady rhythm of legal jargon and measured discussion, became tense as the judge prepared to announce the sentence. Gaither stood, his face reflecting a mixture of anticipation and fear. No one could have anticipated what would happen next. As the judge began to speak, the gravity of the words seemed to freeze the atmosphere. Suddenly, Gaither's expression shifted from shock to something far more disturbing. In a matter of seconds, he collapsed in the middle of the courtroom as his legs buckled beneath him. The cause of such an intense reaction was unclear. Was it the weight of the sentence or something deeper and more personal? A stunned silence fell over the room as people rushed to help him. The scene unfolded rapidly, leaving many to wonder what truly led to his dramatic collapse and what harsh reality he now faces. For many, this marked the end of an era. News of Bill Gaither's legal troubles hit the gospel music community like a bolt of lightning. For years, he was celebrated as a man of deep faith and a unifying force in Christian music, known for delivering messages of hope through powerful songs. But now, his name is in headlines for the wrong reasons. Instead of holding a microphone before thousands, he now stands in court facing serious allegations that could alter his life forever. The accusations are extensive and complex. Prosecutors claim Gaither was involved in financial fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion over several years. According to their findings, funds donated to his ministry, meant to support faith-based outreach and charitable work, were funneled into his personal accounts. Allegedly, he used the money to fund a lavish lifestyle, buying expensive properties, taking luxurious trips, and engaging in dubious business dealings. Adding to the gravity of the case, several former employees and close friends have stepped forward with troubling accounts. Some noted a pattern of financial discrepancies, while others said they were urged to stay silent when they began asking questions. One insider remarked, "We knew something wasn't right, but no one wanted to believe it." How could someone like Bill Gaither, someone we all admired, be involved in something so dishonest? The situation took an even more dramatic turn when investigators discovered offshore accounts tied to Gaither. These foreign accounts are often used to conceal money and avoid taxes, and prosecutors argue this shows a deliberate attempt to hide funds from both the government and Gaither's followers. Gaither's legal team insists it's all a misunderstanding. They argue the money was allocated for legitimate ministry activities and that the offshore accounts were intended for international projects. But the prosecution remains unconvinced. With mounting evidence, unaccounted funds, and multiple witnesses speaking out, they claim this case is too extensive to be chalked up to confusion. Then came the trial's most startling moment. As the judge prepared to issue the sentence, Gaither suddenly collapsed. Some attribute it to stress, while others speculate it was a last-ditch attempt to delay the inevitable. Regardless, the courtroom was thrown into chaos. Paramedics rushed in, cameras flashed, and uncertainty filled the air. The pressing question now is, what's next? Will Gaither face prison time, or could he walk away with a lighter punishment? Loyal fans continue to support him, insisting he's being wrongly targeted and believing God will vindicate him. Others, however, feel betrayed, deeply shaken that someone they trusted could fall so far. Regardless of the outcome, Gaither's career will never be the same. Whether guilty or innocent, the damage to his reputation is undeniable and lasting. As Bill Gaither sat in the courtroom, hands clasped and eyes fixed on the table before him, the weight of the moment felt overwhelming. This wasn't the familiar stage of his performances, where music and faith once soothed both him and his audiences. This was a stark, cold environment, unforgiving and irreversible. The room was quiet, thick with tension, the only sound being the shuffling of the judge's papers. Gaither felt the eyes on him and sensed the wide range of emotions filling the room: disbelief, sadness, anger, and for some, quiet satisfaction. His thoughts drifted to his long career, the songs that had touched so many lives, the packed arenas, the shared joy of music and belief. How had it come to this? How had the man who preached redemption and trust ended up awaiting a verdict that could dismantle his legacy? His wife, Gloria sat close by, silent and still, praying. She had always been his strength, a calming constant by his side. He wanted to reach for her, to say something that might reassure her, but he found himself without words. Despite a lifetime of standing confidently before crowds, this moment left him feeling more alone than ever. The quiet murmurs in the room ceased. The judge cleared his throat, and Bill inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself for what was to come. But how could anyone truly be ready for this? The courtroom now felt like a cage, confining him to a reality he could barely comprehend. The roaring applause of his concerts felt like a distant memory, replaced by the sterile tension of legal judgment. He wondered about his fans, those who had stood by him for decades. Were they still with him, waiting to support him? Or had they already turned away? The thought of their disappointment hurt more than the charges themselves. The media had covered every angle, turning his life into a spectacle, analyzing and judging every move. It all felt surreal, until now. Now, as the judge prepared to speak, reality hit with full force. The defense had made their case. His lawyers had done all they could. But the outcome was no longer in his hands. The power now rested with the judge and the justice system. As the judge took a breath and prepared to deliver the verdict, Bill clenched his fists and braced himself. The courtroom remained still as Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses and began to speak. The atmosphere was suffocating. Bill remained frozen, gripping the arms of his chair as his heart pounded. Would he leave this place a free man, or would this moment define a tragic downfall? The judge's face offered no clues as he cleared his throat. Across the gospel music world, it felt as though everyone held their breath. Gloria continued to pray silently, her fingers tightly interlocked. This court has reviewed all evidence, testimonies, and arguments presented, Judge Harrison began. We acknowledge Mr. Gaither's contributions to the music industry, the impact of his work, and his influence on millions. However, the charges before us cannot be dismissed. Murmurs rippled through the room. Bill felt a lump in his throat, his breathing shallow. He understood the seriousness of the situation, but hearing the judge's words made it painfully real. The judge continued, his tone firm. It is the decision of this court that Mr. Gaither is found. He paused, stretching the moment unbearably. Then came the word that would echo in the minds of everyone present, guilty. Gasps erupted from the crowd, followed by whispers and disbelief. Some people clutched their chests, the others shook their heads in denial. Bill remained frozen, his vision blurring as he focused on the judge. Over the noise, Judge Harrison pressed on. This court sentences William James Gaither to 5 years in federal custody, along with financial penalties as deemed appropriate. The gavel struck, sealing his fate. The sound was deafening, final, irreversible. Bill's stomach dropped. He exhaled sharply, his hands gripping his knees to keep from shaking. His ears rang, drowning out the shocked reactions around him. 5 years. The words replayed over and over in his mind. 5 years away from his family. 5 years away from his music. 5 years where he would be nothing more than another name in a system that had no concern for who he had been before. Laura let out a soft sob, barely audible beneath the murmuring crowd. The reality of it hit her too. Bill turned his head slightly, catching the broken expression on her face. It was harder to bear than the sentence itself. The prosecution remained expressionless while the defense team exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mix of disappointment and determination. There was talk of appeals, of pushing for a lesser sentence, but at this moment those were just words. The verdict had been spoken. Somewhere in the courtroom, a journalist was already typing the headline that would flood social media within seconds: a gospel legend Bill Gaither sentenced, a fall from grace. He could see it now, splashed across news sites, debated endlessly on talk shows, twisted and reshaped until the truth barely mattered anymore. Security approached, ready to escort him away. Bill inhaled deeply, straightened his posture, and stood. If this was how it was going to be, he wouldn't allow them to see him break. He had spent his life preaching faith through hardship. Now he had no choice but to live those words himself. The judge had spoken, the world was watching, and the gospel community would never be the same. Well, in your song I didn't see any redemption. All I saw was a chance to get a laugh from the audience. And to me, it was a cheap laugh from the audience. How would you have felt had you been the parents of a homosexual child who said to you that day that he was gay, or the daughter was a lesbian? How would you have felt about that? Had you had somebody up there making fun of your sons and daughters in a Christian context? I would have thought very good about it. And you offer no grace, no redemption to them. If you're serious about that subject, why don't you go to school and do some studying of theology? See how the scripture deals with it, some philosophy, some psychology, and address the subject seriously as you feel God is telling you to. But don't do it in a context that would be hurtful. But that's been done on Christian stages. Family and fan reactions oscillated between shock, loyalty, and betrayal. The moment the judge's gavel struck, sending its final echoing crack through the courtroom, the reality finally sank in for everyone present. Bill Gaither, an icon of gospel music, a man who had built an empire on faith, family, and the power of music, was now a convicted man. The words of the verdict hung in the air like a fog, heavy and suffocating. While the courtroom held a stunned silence, the world outside was anything but quiet. The first reaction came from the people closest to him, his family. Gloria Gaither, his wife and lifelong partner in both music and faith, sat frozen in place, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles turned white. She had been holding on to hope until the very last second, believing that somehow, some way, things wouldn't come to this. But now, with Bill's fate sealed, all she could do was stare at him. Her eyes were filled with pain, disbelief, and an almost desperate determination. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall, not here, not now. Instead, she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and reached for Bill's hand as he stood to be escorted away. He squeezed it gently, the only way he could silently reassure her. Their children were in the courtroom as well, their expressions a reflection of the chaos in their hearts. Ben, their son, clenched his jaw, his frustration evident. He had spent his whole life watching his father be a pillar of faith and guidance for millions. How could this happen to a man who had only ever dedicated himself to spreading the gospel? He wanted to believe there had to be some mistake, some miscalculation that could be fixed. I don't understand, he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. This isn't real. His sister Suzanne sat quietly beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze locked on their father. Unlike Ben, she didn't speak, but her silence spoke volumes. She had seen the way the media had turned on her father in recent months, watched the storm of accusations swirl around their family like vultures circling their prey. She had always known that fame came with its challenges, but never in her worst nightmares had she imagined this. I don't think you can do major surgery on a public stage. And some of the issues are major, serious issues. So if you're going to do major, serious surgery on a public stage, you better make sure that you can cut the patient totally open, get out all the toxic poisons and everything, and sew him back up. Just don't open them up and say, okay preachers, you take care of this mess I've just made. Some subjects are so tough that you can't deal with them with 3,000 people sitting out there. They're so tough you can't even deal with 300. And maybe not even 30. Because to this person, he will accept it on this level. And this person will say, well, that doesn't apply to me. Some issues are so tough that you need to deal with them one-on-one. Let's take a serious issue like divorce. Divorce is terrible. None of us like divorce, but sometimes it happens. And it happens in the Christian church. Now, rather than make a blanket statement about divorce, we have to think too carefully. It takes two people to make a marriage, and if one person didn't want to be married, the poor. My sister went through a divorce. I don't think she had any choice. My brother went through a divorce. I thank God that I'm still married to the same woman I married 53 years ago. I'm grateful for that. But I'm not going to put a guilt trip on somebody who did everything he could. And I know many people. Then there were the fans, millions of them, scattered across the world. People who had looked up to Bill Gaither as a spiritual guide, a mentor, a voice of comfort in their darkest moments. For years, his music had been a source of healing and strength. And now, in the wake of his conviction, his supporters found themselves grappling with emotions they never expected to feel. Social media exploded within minutes of the verdict. Hashtags like #JusticeForGaither and #GospelScandal began trending, with passionate debates flooding comment sections and online forums. Bill Gaither is a man of God. This is a witch hunt, one fan wrote on Twitter, their post gaining thousands of likes in minutes. Another wasn't so sure. I grew up listening to his music. I don't even know what to think anymore. If the court found him guilty, does that mean he was never the man we believed he was? The division was stark. Some fans stood by him without hesitation, convinced that he was being unfairly targeted. Others felt betrayed, struggling to reconcile the man they had admired with the charges he now faced. Gospel radio stations debated whether to continue playing his music. Some pulled his songs from their rotation immediately, not wanting to be associated with the controversy. Others refused to turn their backs on him, stating that his music was bigger than the scandal, that it had inspired too many lives to simply be erased. Meanwhile, within the gospel music industry, reactions were just as mixed. Some of Bill's closest colleagues and fellow musicians reached out privately to offer their support, refusing to believe the worst. But others, whether out of self-preservation or personal doubt, chose to distance themselves. One prominent gospel artist made a cryptic post that read, "We never truly know the hearts of men. What's done in the dark will always come to light." It didn't take long for the media to latch onto every reaction, every piece of speculation, spinning narratives from the ashes of Gaither's once unshakable reputation. News anchors dissected the verdict. Legal experts weighed in on the implications. Online sleuths dug into every aspect of his career, his finances, his personal life, anything that could add fuel to the fire. Even within his own circle, the fallout had begun. Some longtime members of the Gaither vocal band, artists who had shared the stage with him for years, found themselves facing uncomfortable questions. Were they going to continue supporting him? Did they know anything before all of this came to light? One former band member, speaking anonymously, told a journalist, "Bill was always the leader, always the one guiding the group. I never questioned him, but looking back, maybe I should have." The weight of those words sent shockwaves through the community. As Bill sat in the holding cell waiting for the next steps in the process, he knew his world had changed forever. He had spent his life lifting people up through faith and music. But now, as he stared at the cold grey walls around him, he realized that faith alone wouldn't be enough to fix this. The trust of his fans had been shaken. His family was hurting. And the gospel world would never be the same.